Hello and welcome to Clawful Evil, Probable Claws, a show where we discuss Wildbow's most hospital-bound work. I'm your conniving hostess, Kippos.
And I'm your very villainous hostess, Vice Versailles. In this debriefing, we're covering Chapter 4.3.
And yeah, honestly, I'm actually kind of glad that we're doing 4.3 by itself, because it's so dense. Like, there's so much here to dig into.
I think, usually we have a vibes-based discussion before we get into the chapter summary, but it's probably worth, leading with it for this one time. In 4.3, Ryder insists to Ben that he's one of the good ones, while Ripley's DNA test is processed. After asking him to forget something he's forgotten, giving him a flip phone of crucial phone numbers, and that he be called Ryder, they then take Ripley's clothes, stop her from contacting anyone, and call her Camellia. When this doesn't go well, everyone is shocked. And that's the chapter. Really just getting to watch a soup of mistakes and bad interactions in 4.3.
Yeah, I feel like every single adult in this chapter handled almost everything in almost the worst possible way they could. There's a couple of good moments. I think there's two good moments from Ben that I liked. I thought he did pretty well with. And every other time anybody is talking to Ripley, it's fucking horrible.
Yeah, honestly, I'm kind of there's a lot that I am unhappy with about last week's episode. Because we were tired, and I think we really chewed up Ben, and
we did
a lot of first-time commenters, which I was very happy to hear from, expressed their discontent as to just how rough we were with him. I think if we had just waited, we would have had maybe a better point to make. But when if let's maybe approach this character by character. If we start with Ben, I would say that I have a lot of dislike for Ben coming from a sort of heresy of small differences, where I can understand a lot of where he's coming from, and the final step in the equation where he chooses to do something that I believe is incorrect, I am then more firmly against his decisions. But there's also this thing of when we've been talking a lot about the bias of narrators and the fact that it's a Wildbow calling card to have someone have a lot of blind spots and a lot of self-justification. And to try and get ahead of that, I think we sort of went into reading Ben as in the same stance that we had for Mia and Carson, of where is the gaps in the facade? Where is it that this person isn't familiar with what they're doing wrong? And that sort of charity versus penalty, trying to give both sides of give someone credit or try and find their flaws. We went really hard on criticizing Ben, because we were very ready to. Certainly worth it for the criminals in the story.
Yeah.
But if there hadn't been, if we were overzealous last week, while we were, after 5 hours of recording, kind of overdid that a bit. I think if we just waited for this chapter, we would have had a better point to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of our criticism of Ben from the last two chapters is really still now being shown again and again in 4.3. I don't think he's a particularly good guy. And I mean, so Wildbow, I just want to personally apologize to you very quickly. I did say I would bring a discussion on Ben as a liberal ideal. And I do not have that today. I'm probably going to save it until our arc discussion. So yeah, I'll bring that later. I'll either write it up and post it on the Reddit, or I will bring it to our arc.
If we're talking discussion about the virtues of kicking the hornet's nest and saying things that will be divisive to produce discourse, I think that's going to be the hardest possible kick we can deliver. Full roundhouse. But in the meantime, I mean, like, just to get started with Ben in this setting, why is his camera on?
Yeah, the fucking camera.
like like Willow is doing this neat structural thing where like this chapter ends with camera off because in the whole time the camera is on. It's his job, you know. Like this is what Ben has dedicated himself to, and like it's specifically what he thought was more worthwhile than becoming the sort of parapolice that Ryder is. I'm
sorry, go on. Yeah.
Well, like I think building off of your conversation about true crime last week, we get to see quite a bit of the problem with having a camera on at all times, with what Ripley goes through and what gets saved perhaps be widely disseminated.
Yeah, I think something that feels natural to me, but I guess is very not to everyone else. I guess not everyone else, but to many other people, is the camera, like, just as an object, the camera being on, you know, people being filmed, can feel like violence. And that is because to some people, it is a very real threat of violence. And again, that is an essay that I've been meaning to dig into, is the false neutrality of the camera. Because, yeah, I mean, personally, to me, you know, as someone who is trans and has autism, like, being filmed is a threat to me. Like, it's not the cold light of truth being shown upon, you know, my actions. It's an invitation for, you know, the faceless hordes. Yeah, it's an invitation for scrutiny from the faceless hordes of the internet. And as someone that
I'm particularly reminded of like the crazes and like dedicated feeds that will look at photos of just even like any celebrity and will try and like aggressively gender them. Which is a very, very strange space in the internet, because that's part where the conspiracy spaces for every celebrity being trans overlaps.
The fucking transvestigation.
The transvestigation. But within what Ben is doing here, everything about what Ripley is going through is being exacerbated by the fact that all of it's going to be put forward for public scrutiny. Like, Ripley is in a, like, if this went perfectly well, but it was also put on camera, then it would be widely known as Ripley goes into her teenage years and becomes an adult that like this whole personal history happened, and that she was kidnapped and raised by a different family and then kidnapped back.
She'd never have peace.
And she wouldn't have peace because she'd be a public figure. And we touched on it already, the fact that it might be an Australianism that privacy, when it is a really treasured thing, and that it's not something that you gently consent to, or just sort of like or handle with this sort of degree of force. One thing that stands out here is how Ben gets Josie to provide a statement, and
I hated that moment.
Because it's so on the spot.
Yeah, on the spot, like, surrounded by everyone else. Josie says, "No, like, I'm not comfortable," and then he doesn't take that no as a no. He takes the no as a challenge and says, "Oh, here's why you should say yes to me, even though you said no." And then Josie doesn't explicitly consent, but she says, "Okay, Like, well, she doesn't say okay. She says, like, "What do you want to know?" And then afterwards, like, her mum consents on her behalf, like, explicitly, which
also spends in the interview commentating on what it is that Josie has to divulge.
Yeah, exactly. And not only, so this is a note from further down in our notes, but like, not only does Josie's mum commentate on everything, but everybody around them is there and like party to the interview. And it actually hurts Ben and his investigation. Like, it helps the documentary having, you know, everybody around and like Natalie being able to comment in, but it hurts the investigation because, you know, if he'd said, "Okay, cool, I will, you know, do this interview," Josie like, please come into this other room with me. And, you know, presumably, like, Josie's mom also, please come along because, you know, guardian and all that. He could have said, like, here's this, like, oh, I filmed this other guy as well, you know, anything about that. And then they would learn about Highland and they would learn about Valentina. But they just don't. It
isn't even necessarily because Josie doesn't want to share. It's because...
It's because Natalie is, like, angry.
It's because instead of asking Josie in a controlled environment or offering to, like, set a time or... Like, instead of a compromise where someone said no, so you offered them other options, Ben insists on the most immediate thing, the one that he wanted, and all of the ways in which Josie felt that was a bad idea come true.
And there's this big difference between what is good for the documentary and what is good for, like, the investigation. And it feels like Ben hews towards what is good for the documentary as his, like, it's subconscious. He doesn't think, oh, you know, Natalie being here might, you know, she might have a negative reaction to this discussion, so I should take it away, so we can actually have a full and proper discussion. You know, he doesn't think, like, oh, she's a teenage girl. She's going to be, like, going through this, like, incredibly stressful experience. I'll just get her to give, like, a written thing, and then we can talk about it. You know, or, like, even, like, do or can I film you? And, you know, I'm explicitly telling you, like, this is not going in the documentary. Like, you know, because part of his reason is, like, filming would help me, like, come back to this and, like, get ideas and, like, might help me, like, review it and stuff. But then the assumption is that if it's filmed, it's okay to go in the documentary. And that sucks. I don't know. Like, it hurts the investigation because he's not able to dig into other things. He's, like, almost browbeating, like, a 16-year-old into giving consent to something that she's not comfortable for, or not comfortable with, or not entirely comfortable with. Like, it's very much, it's not enthusiastic consent, as we would talk about in, like, the adult it's dating
useful.
sphere. Yeah,
it's useful to understand consent as the models of consent as something that can apply in basically any environment. Because when you establish that you value that someone wants to be here and that they want to be doing what you're doing together, then you've opened up the conversation for reasons why that might not be the case, and for addressing that directly, and making sure that, because ultimately you're putting forward that as a priority, that no matter what could be happening instead, it would not be worth it if people weren't comfortable with it happening. And, like, that can apply. Like, this is my director brain coming through, where like, this is a talk I give to people that are doing theater, and, like, there's like intimacy, bodily contact, like improvised scenes where people might be yelling at one another, or, like, other extremes of emotion or sudden, like, dynamics. You need that level of communication so that it stays fun. But like, fun, like, the priority there is joy, fun, and comfort. And it, like, if you, like, it doesn't necessarily lose that quality when you apply consent to a different sphere. But I want to take a moment, like, to give Ben some charity here, because the reason that again and again he is not prioritizing someone's discomfort is because the priority that is among his highest, like, we can argue that his and, like, whether his values are exactly as he understands them, but among those values is that this is a ongoing police investigation where they seem to have uncovered a whole like, kidnapping ring, which is like, professional in its criminal span, and, like, they search for trackers and they find a tracker. There was a bomb threat at the school, and I'd like to note real quick, we skipped over the bomb threat because
we did.
In our heads, we as readers know that Mia and Carson of all people would not be making a bomb threat against the school.
Yeah, they would not plant a bomb
danger.
where they had they would not detonate a bomb where they had reasonable belief that it could like seriously harm or kill a child. Like that's just like we know that's Mia's baseline.
We have that as factual knowledge, but giving Mia that charity that she then would go the extra mile to make sure that doesn't happen, as in like no one gets injured. Knowing that like Carson was like in the school at the time and like might have even placed the bomb himself. Between like those factors, we give Mia and Carson a lot of charity very easily. Because we know them as characters already, but giving Ben and Ryder charity, they don't know that. And they are responding to the situation as though it is an unfolding, urgent, people in peril, traumatic event. And yet, at the same time, the natural consequence to that is this like deprioritization of this other people's comfort, and the direct consequence of that is a self-sabotaging one. In the same way that if like in as we saw with Ben earlier in at 4.1, the way that Mia was uncovered was that she was so paranoid that the car that was almost a match for the one they were looking out for was suspicious for how close it was, and it was further investigated because of how she tried to disguise it. And in turn, like that's her paranoia going from a strength to a weakness just by playing itself out. Ben has a very similar problem where he's prioritizing the truth. He feels that there's an urgent justice-related scenario here. He's prioritizing that. He tells Josie, you need to tell us things now. There might be crucial information here. And because he's rushing it, because he's not prioritizing Josie's comfort, there's information that he can't reach because he has an interview in a dramatic way where there is where there's spectators.
I think it is very, I don't know, I still think it's very damning that he sees Josie's discomfort at the idea of giving it, and he doesn't extend the grace of saying, okay, I see you're uncomfortable. Like, how can I make this interview comfortable for you? Like, is there a compromise that we can do such that I'm able to get the information that you have and you feel actually comfortable sharing? And look, it might have been that there wasn't a compromise here that Josie would feel comfortable sharing. But it might have been that like doing it without the camera on, like obviously because Ben says he does need the camera to be able to review the footage. Fine. Okay, sure. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's fine. But if he had said, if a compromise had been, I don't want to be in the documentary, like I don't want my name, my voice, my likeness, I do not want it, like you cannot use this footage for your document, then I'll have this interview because it's to do with the case. It's trying to help stop what's happening.
And maybe that's the version that reveals Valentina and Highland. And then maybe that's the version that makes this a safer operation.
Yeah. Or maybe she says, I'm comfortable giving the interview, but I don't want to do it around literally everyone who's going to be like, Natalie makes a side comment, like Roderick makes a side comment.
Right.
Like everyone's okay. Look, you can call him Ryder. I'm sticking with Roderick. We had a discussion about this yesterday, and
here is okay. I'm getting on my soapbox. Soapbox. Hi, welcome to VV's soapbox. Just imagine me like at your eye level. Because I'm like it's like a very small soapbox. It actually makes me shorter. So in Ben's narration, he calls Ripley Camellia. And in Ben's narration, he calls Ryder Roderick. And Ripley has asked to be called Ripley, and Ryder has asked to be called Ryder. And the reason that Ben thinks it's okay for him to be naming these people the names that he thinks are correct is because he believes that these are the objectively true names. He believes that they're like that no matter what Ryder says, Rod or Roderick is correct. And no matter what Ripley says, Camellia or Cammy is correct, because it says so on the birth certificates. And what I think Ben skips wholeheartedly, and it's his central character trait of the truth shall reveal, going from a strength to a flaw. He believes that he is simply right, and he doesn't need to engage with the person about what the details are. But if he listened to Roderick about why he wants to be called Ryder, I think he would find the argument somewhat compelling, which is that Roderick is a bad name.
Sorry to any Rodericks listening.
Well, to be specific, Ryder does not like being called Roderick, because Rod is worse, and, like, who wants to, like, it's like a guy called Richard being asked not to be called Dick, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not a great name, and, if maybe Ryder grew up on Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and doesn't want to be called Roderick whatsoever. Maybe it's a family name and he has bad associations with it. None of these thoughts are occurring to Ben, because Ben thinks that Ryder's objective name is Roderick and he's going to call him Roderick. Now, I think any human being would look at someone asking to be called Ryder and see that they're a gun-toting sheriff, trapezing across the states, doling out their own personal brand of justice, and go, that's silly. You're being a bit silly. But does that mean that, does that silliness then mean, let's just call him by the name that he has? Certainly in Ben's books, because it's a straightforward judgment to him. Like, the fact that Ryder wants to be called Ryder is just like a little call sign. It's a little fun thing for him. For Ripley has only ever been Ripley. She doesn't like Camellia as a name. She hadn't heard it before until Natalie tried to give her the pitch on it and didn't like it. But Ben applies the same Occam's razor of, it says so on paperwork, so it must be so now, and doesn't really engage with any of where Ripley is coming from. And the side effect of this is that he uses the word deprogramming with Natalie. He believes that, because the truth is that Camellia is the true person that is there, and has just been convinced that she's Ripley, that they need to deprogram Ripley until she becomes Camellia again, except for the fact that Ripley is 11 and has never been anyone else.
Yeah.
And there is nothing to deprogram, because that's the person that is being targeted. All of these points of resistance, like the very dramatic, like, providing Ripley the clothes that like the highly stereotypical ones that, like, Natalie envisioned for her daughter, putting that on camera, making it like a sort of like supposed to be heartfelt, dramatic idea, only for Ripley to throw them away. Like, oh my goodness, it's so heart-wrenching, except for the fact that Ripley was never that daughter. She's never been that person. Like,
yeah.
When she was called Camellia was so early in her development that she does not recall it, and it has no direct, like, those memories don't relate to the person that she has become. And in Ben's mind, these are the same thing. Ripley is being silly for wanting to be called Ripley, and Ryder is being misguided for wanting to be called Ryder. And I think that Ben simply believing that he has a correct answer and then refusing to engage with where the person is coming from is the real source of the problem. Because he thinks that simply by revealing the truth and putting things on camera, more good shall come of it. But that's simply not so.
Yeah. And look, I agree with most of the take on Ripley there. I just can't call him Ryder. It's such a superhero ass. He wants to LARP as a superhero, as the lone rider, the lone gunman. I hate him. I'm not giving him the respect that he requires. Well, that he thinks he deserves.
I'm going to be carrying my soapbox around as a hat. I'm going to be wearing it as a little helmet. It's gonna it's too big for my head, so it's gonna bash against the sides of my skull every once in a while. But I'm committing hard to calling him Ryder, because if he this is his high self concept, this it may be I believe a very dangerous like thing to spend your time on, because it's a conversation at the very beginning, where he asks Ben to call him Ryder. It gets into essentially Ryder is arguing that he is not involved with the Cavalcantis, or he's not beholden to them. And he makes he pretty much touches on the notes that we did last week of like, well, he's from out of town. He knows of them, but he doesn't think they're that big a deal. He's and then surprisingly, he's willing to tolerate Ben's understanding the situation and work with his suspicion, which is very noble.
It is.
But then a little bit later, Ryder gives a very respectful nod to one of the police on staff, the guards.
It's actually
gives him a smile back.
It's one of the cops doing the interview. Not the one doing the interview, but like one of the ones flanking like the chief of police who's doing the interview outside the hospital.
Right.
Yeah.
So
but it's very friendly. It's very
because that's a coworker.
Yeah.
And in Ryder's mind, that's just a guy he's working with. Except for the fact that he's just been told that one of those somewhere in that sphere is a Cavalcanti operative, a Cavalcanti informant, someone who doesn't know that they're informing, but that their information is like a sieve. And he doesn't engage with that part. He takes it fully personally as on his identity as Ryder to be suspected as being corrupt. He doesn't look up into his institution. He doesn't see that maybe there's something to be worried about there being police here when the police are involved in the gang system here.
I mean that's exactly the thing. It's like, Ryder talks about like, how can I make you trust me? And that's good, and the fact that he's willing to like give up his phone, like not go anywhere without supervision, that's really good. But both Ben and Ryder are kind of missing the point there, because it's not that, Ryder is directly working with the Cavalcantis. And like, because obviously we had Highland saying that like, I called him Ryder. Your friend Roderick will he'll sell like Ripley to the Cavalcanti. And
I'm going to batter you down, Kippers.
I'll try and hold my position.
Soapbox.
But yeah, like it's not about the fact that he is going to, take that child, drive it over to Davy's place and accept $200,000 for the child. It's that he is working within the system. It's not that Roderick is, an employee of the Cavalcantis. It's that the Cavalcantis are integrating themselves with the system such that, like, the judge is, like, suspect now. Any police are suspect. Like, when Roderick does work with the system, he is doing work with the Cavalcantis. And so it's not a personal level accusation, even though, I mean, the one that Highland leveled at him was, but, like, the documentation that Valentina sent to Ben is not a personal level accusation to any of the people, because it's not like, the judge is not necessarily, working with the Cavalcantis in that sense. But at the same time, they are, because they're working within the system and the system is working with the Cavalcantis. And if you followed the system exactly so, Ripley would end up with the Cavalcantis. And it's like there's a moment in the chapter here where they say, there's no foster families that are available at the moment for Ripley to go to. And I can't help but see like a sudden like, oh, actually, never mind, there is one. Now that we have this child, and now that it's gone through the system, there's suddenly one that's been opened up with a Davy. I think that's it.
This really sad story about it. His daughter ran away, and he's just been like, it's just been a hole in his heart where he thinks that he can welcome someone in to provide them the support that he couldn't for his daughter.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the fact is that working with the system at the moment is working to fulfill greater evil, because the system has been corrupted. And that is a blind spot of Ben's, as far as, and that's also something I kind of want to get into with Ben as the liberal, the capital L liberal discussion, and his like his trust of the system, even as it has been shown to him that the system is like horribly corrupt. Yeah. Okay, cool. So, okay. Just gonna get through some notes now. Run down the page. Hopefully don't double up on anything. So I thought it was really interesting, just like directly at the start of this chapter and at the end of last chapter. So we get the fake out of Sterling with like at the end of 4.2, where we're like, Sterling's gone missing. And they accuse like Carson and stuff of taking him, and Highland says no, that was like, we didn't take him. Now of it, like, to my mind, as I read that, I was like, yeah, they kind of, I mean, they possibly would. It is in line with something that they might possibly do, but I don't think that they did. And then when Highland says, no, we didn't, yeah, like, I immediately believed him. Like, I thought, like, I don't know, it was a moment for me that I guess didn't land super, like, I wasn't sure what Wildbow was doing with it. And then in the start of this chapter, it's revealed as like he's a nervous kid and he like freaked out and went and hid. Like, fair enough. But it did make me think of like the and Wildbow has talked about before, the triangle of, you know, the work, the author, and the audience, and how those three like interact with each other. And so I'm not sure. I feel like I don't know. It feels to me like it's possible that the audience reaction to that bit at the end of 4.2 was like maybe less intense than Wildbow thought it might be, or less worried, or like less, yeah. So I guess I'm just pointing this out as something like, I'm not sure what was happening here. But it does almost feel like, yeah.
It's one of those moments where if it was a sort of loose thread where no one was really following up on it, he just sort of picked up the drop stitch and brought it back into the narrative with Sterling and Ripley getting to talk.
Yeah, which was an amazing scene. And
there was this note that Wildbow had in a recent Reddit post where he was talking about what was going into Natalie and his experience with parents who found out their child was disabled or atypical, and there being a grieving process where they have to sort of drop their expectations of like where they thought their child was going to go or what they were expecting, and relearn the new field of future. How parents just aren't equipped with coping mechanisms, or the experience requires them to go out on a limb, and they stay out there. That was the phrase that he used. And sort of seeing the consequence of that with Sterling, where Natalie's self-concept in trying to cope and grieve, and particularly we noted it with the cognitive behavioral talk, that she does not value acceptance, because what she really wants is to actually fix the problem at hand. So her grief, going through those initial stages of like bargaining and denial and rage, has never reached acceptance. And the consequence of that is Sterling, who is just like in the simplest terms, underparented.
I mean, there's that moment with that amazing discussion between Ripley and Sterling where Ripley's asking, like, do you have any good memories? Like, are any of your memories good? And he kind of hums and haws and says, it doesn't really say yes. And then she kind of prods him on it, and he says, oh, sometimes we go to grandma's. Oh, is that fun? And he talks about all the toys that are there, and then just says, oh yeah, and mum and grandma just smoke and then sometimes argue. I'm like, oh, okay, so it's pretty fucking miserable. Oh, I go to my dad's sometimes. Oh, how is that? Oh, it's good when like mum and dad aren't arguing. Sometimes mum leaves and like we go watch a movie or we play video games, and that's like nice. And it's like, God. And then he's like, oh, are there any fun like memories of like just your mum? Like, do you go out to the park? Oh yeah, we go out to the park sometimes. And, do you play any games? It's like, oh, I play some games. Oh, does she join in with you? Oh, I'm very good at playing with myself, like by myself. And it's like, that is the saddest fucking experience. Like, Sterling's childhood is, I mean, look, Natalie says at one point that the happiness that Ripley had at home was stolen from her and Sterling. But she has made not really any moves to actually give Sterling a chance for that happiness. Like, she is so traumatized by everything that's happened in her life that she's essentially unable to parent, like unable to try and give her child moments of joy. And that, like, fucking, it breaks my heart. Like, Jesus Christ. It's so, yeah.
I really want to follow this step by step, because this is something that's been bothering me in the discourse of Natalie from the very jump, which is that we got primed by Mia. Mia does not like Natalie because in her self-concept, it's important that Natalie is the problem, and that she did something wrong and Mia did the right thing. Yeah. And that's why everything that happened since is fine, because if it wasn't that way, then things would fall apart.
Yeah, if Natalie is a good parent, if Natalie, sorry, oh my God. If Natalie was a good parent and very good with her kids and like, I don't want to say like a loving mother because she clearly loves Sterling, but like a very active mother that's like very, very active in her child's life and making it as best as it could be, then Mia's a monster. Like, in Mia's perspective, then she is the one that stole this child away from like a functional household where she would have grown up happy. But if Natalie is the monstrous mother that neglects her children and, and her partner like also neglects her children and the kids had no chance from the get-go, then Mia is like the biggest saint in the universe because she saved this child.
Yeah. And she doesn't have to think about it too hard. She just has to find the way that she lets her stop thinking about it.
Well, it wasn't 15 seconds.
Wasn't 15 seconds. Whereas Natalie has fixated on it was only 15 seconds. Like, it was a small thing that exploded out, and that was the only thing that went wrong. And so there's for Natalie to have her own personal integrity, she needs to be very blameless. To the point that as that pain has caused more pain, she needs to also be blameless for those things. And like the reason I want to really follow this is because we were just talking about the charity and penalty lens for Ben. We were also primed against Ben, and like as we come through it, I still feel that the purpose of the having Ben as our point of view character is not that he is a reciprocal to having criminals, right? Where like we know Carson and Mia are doing evil things. Like it's visible. So the question is, how did they justify it to themselves? How do they like how do they continue living guiltlessly? Or how do they cope with the guilt? And it's like we inspected that for sure. And with Ben, it's this man is guiltless. He doesn't feel that he's doing anything wrong. He thinks that what he's doing is righteous. So scrutinizing him amounts to finding the things that he has overlooked, and the pain that he is causing that is not criminal pain, but is still has the traumatic quality, or is still discomforting, or like has immediate and ignored ramification. And so we have within this sphere Natalie, who is a victim, like Natalie who like has had wrong done to her, and in the course of that wrong being perpetuated and not being able to get Camellia, the idea of Camellia, back into her life, or accepting that it wasn't realistic, not being able to cope or grieve, has become a perpetrator, and she's starting to put pain back into the world. She's like in a tangible way, in a deeply unjust way. Natalie has caused more suffering in terms of time to Sterling and to Ripley, like than Mia has, except for the fact that Mia premised Natalie causing that degree of pain. And so it's like I saw people discussing how people have approached Natalie as like perhaps being relatively quite sexist or hypercritical, or like overdoing it in terms of criticizing her. And again, it's that heresy of small differences thing, where I imagine that Mia and Carson are not people that people readily know. and can like think of like, oh yeah, I know the kidnapper down the street, the one that operates like a surveillance state and is running a massive criminal enterprise. Oh, she's my second cousin.
Exactly.
Like, it's rare for people to have Mia and Carsons in their life, but the Natalies and the Bens are very common. Someone that has gone more conservative and more hostile as something bad has happened to them and it's spun out as they've like not come to a new equilibrium, or someone that believes that they are doing the right thing so ardently that they ignore a great deal of the wrong that they assist in. And I think
especially Natalie as the parental figure. I think that rings true to a lot of a lot of queer people. And so like it's easy to map Natalie onto your own parent that was like neglectful and didn't understand, or not just didn't understand, but like suppressed your identity compared to, like, I don't know anyone that I can fucking map Mia or Carson onto. Like, those people are like criminal super geniuses. I don't know any Mias or Carsons, but like I've met some Natalies. You know,
I know people that live with disability. I know people that have had like a lot of like effort and skill and growth for their empathy. And I know people that are very anxious. That'd probably be me. But like to have these elements and then have them simultaneously, and then also be a criminal super genius. That's the twist in the narrative, where like usually that person in your life does not abduct a child and raise them really really well. That's rare. That's not a common twist of fate.
Look, these characters, some of these characters are very far away conceptually from where we are as people, in terms of what they do. And like, that's good for the story. Like, Mia was a fucking fascinating like point of view, but I'll flesh this out and bring it up at another point. Not in this episode, but also like the way that Mia in particular, because there was obviously some comparisons between Mia and Ben when it comes to things like surveillance. Like, the way Mia does violence is Mia does violence as the state does violence. Mia does surveillance as the state does surveillance. Ben does surveillance as the person that you know that is like 24/7 live on TikTok. You can't say anything around them without like a decent chance it's going out to hundreds of people, you know? Like, which is a very different... Personal. Yeah, it's very personal. It's very, very different in how that surveillance is used and how that violence is applied. But yeah, I'll get further into that at some point.
I think within that, you know, state surveillance, people aren't nearly as bothered by being filmed on CCTV cameras that are putting 24/7 recording down in like this city center, for example, or around government buildings. But are they going to be bothered by someone sticking a camera in their face and asking for their opinion on something divisive? One of those scenarios has a face. One of those scenarios has intentionality. And one of them is very confronting, and the other one is just kind of quiet and laid back. It needs to be revealed, or comes
not that it's
up.
Not insidious, but
it's insidious is a good word for it. I kind of want to return to the consent topic because we touched on both Ben's barreling over Josie and Natalie's supposition that she knows what's right for Ripley. There is this single note with Ryder. One of the three things that he asks of Ben. The third thing is kind of silly. It's please call me Ryder. The second thing is very noble. He asks that he hold onto this phone, and if any emergency calls come through, that Ben make it an absolute priority, because it's it keeps Ryder up at night. How serious these problems are.
Very noble. Yeah,
very noble. The first one,
maybe not so noble.
Well, it's kind of like a rolled ankle in the stride. It's like I'm like you didn't stop running, but I'm so confused at what you tripped on right then, because he asked about Baby McCraney. Who's apparently a year younger, which is a weird thing to call her baby about.
Very weird.
And she was like, absolutely no one can interact with her, says her older brother. And like, Ryder is going on and on about it in a lot heavier detail than the personal request and the noble request. And he's trying to jog Ben's memory about this scenario. And then Ben, like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he doesn't think about it very hard either. Like, we don't get like out of dialogue narration. So the interchange we get is Ryder going, oh, thank you, good sport. You're covering for me and you don't even know it. And Ben doesn't say anything that he doesn't. I have no idea what you're talking about. I vaguely recall, it's water under the bridge, I must not remember, and doesn't think about it either. This is what the camera is seeing.
Yeah,
because Ben knows he's on camera. And this is very boys' locker room talk. It's
so boys' locker room in the very like Trump way of like boys' locker room.
Baby McCraney. You know, we have a little fun nickname for her, and like, well, let's talk about what her brother said about her, and like,
talk about how she felt. You know, never talk about her as a person. More, it's talking about her as an object owned by her brother.
Yeah.
And the fact that they also mention it being at a party and them being young, I don't know. I don't like this. No, sorry. It's not that I don't like it as in I don't like that it was written. I do like that it was written. It's interesting. In universe, you know, I don't like this. It doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel like it's weird.
It's one of those details that casts a horrible shadow if you look at it in the right light.
Yeah, it feels of like they're talking about something that was potentially of dubious consent.
Yeah, and
that's what it feels like, and I'd hate it.
Especially in the context of Ben knowing that he's on camera. And responding as though, it's just something. And then Ryder thanks him for it. We get no description of the tangible event that happened. Ben doesn't think about it. And Ryder is deeply thankful that there is no scrutiny being delivered
holding on to it for, decades.
Yeah,
I don't remember how long ago. Maybe like a decade or something.
It's not only still on his mind, it's the thing that he believes that Ben is thinking about as well.
It's the first thing on his mind when it comes to Ben. And
above the no priority and above the somewhat silly personal priority. So there's the world where whatever this was just beneath Ben's judgment. The reason that he's saying he doesn't remember is because he doesn't remember. It was just something that happened when they were kids or when they were younger. And it's just a fiasco and it's not a big deal. Not like the water under the bridge, it's past.
Yeah.
The other one is where he knows full well the power of the camera, so he's not going to reveal information that might be incriminating. And for an officer of the law that is qualified to work on a somewhat federal level, this seems like it might be a very serious problem. Certainly seems like it might be a big priority to the man, as he is, currently involved in a sting operation to find to reveal a kidnapping ring. But this is his priority.
I definitely feel like it leans more towards Ben just doesn't remember.
If
based
Ben
on the internal
narration, it's because it's beneath his notice, it's beneath his priority. It's his judgment is Ryder is a good guy. Whatever Ryder's bothered about, it's not a concern. There's the more insidious, like we can be like less charitable version of it. I think the most charitable version of it is that it was just plain silly and it was something embarrassing that happened when they were kids. Kids by the time that they're now more adult.
Like 22. Something like that. That's children.
And
sorry, I forgot how old you were, baby. Is it 22? Was I right?
You my soapbox has a smoking hole in it where someone has shot me straight through the head, and I have been defeated. I am felled. I am slain.
Truly children at 22. I agree.
Yes, they're all children at 22. Anywho, the way away.
Anyway, yeah.
More to my point. This is a really uncomfortable moment for both of them, and they move on from it as quickly as possible. And I am wondering as to its purpose, because I don't think that it's a big enough moment that we're going to get the whole explanation.
I agree.
And I think the most mileage you can get out of it, like trying to get out of a deep conspiracy like rabbit hole read of knowing exactly what it is that Ryder did, stepping all the way out of it, his first priority is something to do with his reputation. And he thinks that Ben is holding it over him, and that's part of why they interact the way they do. And he's actually kind of like sensitive and embarrassed about it, and it cuts right through the character that he wants to be.
Yeah.
Like and so when he storms into Ripley's room, doesn't answer any of her questions,
God.
Gets the tracker out of her shoe, because she was being tracked by Mia, and that's a pretty big reveal. And instead of telling Ripley why that might have happened, or like whether it was radioactive or she was in danger, he says no and then leaves.
Yeah, he does. He says no to it being radioactive, and that's it.
It freaks her out. And then he has this whole conversation about how trust is a currency. It's why I didn't let you into that room, Ben. We can do everything right here and still lose her trust, because the things that are best to do right now aren't necessarily the things that feel best for her. Our goal is to get her home to you, Natalie. That's a really great idea, Ryder. It doesn't seem like it seems like the way that he barges into this scenario is because he wants to be the action hero, and because he's just felt like he's an embarrassed young man. And so this trust as a currency idea, he immediately spends all of it, and does nothing to gain it back, and makes Ripley feel really uncomfortable, because, I mean, frankly, I think what he was going for is that he wanted to be bad cop. Like, I will, like, it's why I didn't let you into the room, Ben. You be the good cop. I'll be bad cop. I'll go do the hard and difficult thing. When he could have been any sort of attentive, or
could have been not a cop.
No, maybe don't be a cop about this one, Ryder.
Yeah, sorry. This shit really, really bothers me.
This is where we get into the big thing about this chapter, which is how Ripley is treated.
Yeah, because so in my work, there are times when I have to deny agency to people, and it sucks. Okay, like straight up, it's a shitty thing to do. Nobody enjoys it. The person who's being denied agency hates it generally. The person denying the agency also fucking hates it. For example, I was in the car a few weeks ago with a client and another coworker, and we were driving along, and the client started having a panic attack, and he said, like, I need to get out of the car. And so he he tried to undo his seatbelt, and he tried to start opening the door. And obviously in that situation, that's like, he's putting his life at risk. You know, we have to, at that point, deny him his agency and say, I'm so sorry, like, you can't do that right now. We're going to pull over as soon as we fucking can, and we'll get you out of the car, and, you know, you can walk around. Like, yeah, we will give you, like, back your agency as soon as we possibly can. But we're so sorry, we have to deny it from you in this moment, because it is a risk. And it sucks. Like, it's rough. It's I don't know how to explain enough how horrible that is to have to do to people, because nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to take away someone's agency, someone's ability to consent. Like, if you're a decent person, like, it's genuinely, it's really heartbreaking to have to do. And the way you don't do it is you don't hear someone say, I guess my consent doesn't fucking matter. Oh, I guess she doesn't say fuck because she brings it up in a whole thing later, but whatever. You know, I guess my consent doesn't matter. You don't ignore that. You know, you come in, and you come in gently. You come in softly, and you say, look, I'm so fucking, like, I'm so sorry. This is a horrible experience for you. words cannot describe how sorry I am that I have to do this, but this is for your safety. And maybe I can't explain exactly why it's for your safety right now, but just know that as a person, I'm genuinely heartbroken that I'm having to do this to you. And I know that doesn't help, but there is humanity in me, and I don't want to have to do this, but I feel like I have to for your safety. And that's so much more than just saying, than just answering, oh, is it radioactive? Is she's freaking out and just saying, no, I'm like walking. Like, I hate it. I hate the way essentially every interaction with Ripley happens this chapter, because every single time they are denying her agency and they are forcing her to be in a place where she's not comfortable, and they're not explaining anything. Like, you can explain to someone without explaining to them. You can say, I'm so sorry, we're like really worried for your safety. It's not about, we're not at hospital because we think you're going to die or you have an infectious disease or something. We're at hospital because we were worried about like a possible concussion or something with the explosion, and also because we have to run some tests. And I'm really, really sorry that we have to do this. Like, there are ways to do this that aren't completely, totally world-shatteringly traumatic. Yeah. Like, and Ben even acknowledges, like, this was the worst day of her life, and tomorrow is going to be worse. Like when they get the genetic test back, and yet at no point do they say, well, do they be gentle? Okay, okay. There's 2 points, I think.
Anything we can do to make you more comfortable?
Yeah.
When is it that he asks that?
That is, I believe, that is after the that is after they've told her that she is Natalie's daughter, and she walks out of the room, and I think that's when she hears the deprogramming, and then he asks, like, is there anything we can do to make you more comfortable? And then she says, call my fucking mum. Like, I'm only getting one half.
To which he does say, like, no.
I don't think that, like, I think that would be, like, dangerous.
Yeah.
Which is a reasonable answer, and he's correct there. And that's like, I mean, he could have said that in a nicer way. But perhaps
to have said it then, to have said it only after he's, if Ryder is talking about trust as a currency, he spent it all. And then goes further into depth by saying one thing that one need that you have expressed, I have to deny you that one. That blow could have been softened if he had developed a rapport, or if anyone had developed a rapport. But I mean,
honestly, like every single time that they talk to Ripley, I was just thinking, you are the wrong, like the social worker, like I've forgotten her name, Ava, I think. She should have been the one talking to Ripley. Every single time that there is a discussion with Ripley, it should have been the person that is fucking trained for it and that is going to go in with kindness and empathy, and not the fucking cop and not the dude that she doesn't know from a fucking bar of soap. He's like an investigative like reporter. Okay, cool, whatever. Like that doesn't help her. Like what would help her right now is someone that would go empathy first and try and make her comfortable. And Ben does end up there by inviting her friends around, which is, that is the second good thing he did in this chapter. And the best thing he's done so far is like actually think, what would help this young girl through this traumatic experience. Rather than thinking, the night before, oh, well, this was the shittiest day of her life and the next day is going to be worse. But
good, I
guess
drama. She'll
deal with it. Like, it's only when she's actually having a full-on breakdown that he's like, oh, God, like, okay, now let's actually try and think of something that would help.
And he does think of something pretty damn good.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, genuinely the best thing that anybody has done for Ripley this entire fucking story. Like, Mia and Carson included. Like, yeah, best thing that anyone's done for her. I'm sorry, I'm really heated about this chapter because the way that, like, essentially everybody is just continuously fucking traumatizing Ripley is, like, it's kind of difficult to read. It's really fucking brutal. Like, she's just a girl. She's just 11. Holy fuck. I don't know.
I'm rereading it again to introduce the people behind me. If you guys could poke your heads in. This is Eve. She works at the hospital. Yeah. She's your advocate. Her focus is making sure you feel safe. If you need something later, you can talk to her. If you need something later, you can talk to her. Camellia had shrunken into herself, hunching forward, hands grabbing ankles past the thin blanket. There's Miles Montano. He's security, keeping you and us safe. Things got scary at the school. He's making sure that doesn't happen again. Would someone please tell me what's going on? This is Ben. He's an investigator. Ben leaded and waved to Ben.
I hate that. I hate that so much. He's so not understanding the context here. Like, this is not a point where you lean in and go, oh, hello, give a little wave. Like, it's not a pithy, it's not a small moment. Like, her world is about to be torn into, and don't just be...
That is... So it's after she's been introduced to the advocate that she then immediately has the news broken.
Yeah.
We could probably have introduced the advocate to her when she arrived at the hospital.
Honestly, that is what I was thinking. Like, at the hospital when she gets there, anytime you go in and see her, you say, "Hi, I'm Ryder. I am like a police officer. I'm a para-police officer. I'm like here to try and help you." You don't say, "Oh, I specialize in kidnapping," because at that point they're not entirely certain. But like you just say like, "Hi, I'm Ryder. I'm here. Like I'm here. I'm a para-police. I'm here to try and protect you and keep you safe." And next person comes in like and says, "Oh, hi. I'm like the security guard. I'm also here to try and protect you and like keep you safe." And if she asks like, "What do I need protection from?" Saying like, "I'm so sorry. Like, we're not entirely certain. It's an ongoing like situation, but we are here to try and help." And Ben could pop in and say like, because he's like kind of spoken like near her and around her, but never actually to her like until basically this point. Except for at the school where he could have said, "Oh, I'm an investigator. I've just been looking into some stuff around this." Like, it doesn't have to be like, "Oh, now let's all line up and say hello," and then, "Oh, by the way, like,
and then drop
you
the
were
bomb
stolen from your like mum as a 1-month-old." Like, fuck me.
I love there's a silver lining on this thunderstorm cloud, and it's that my bold and specific prediction was right. I did say that she wouldn't believe it outright, and she didn't. Because,
that's actually
sometimes when you look at the horizon and see that there are storm clouds, you can say, "Hey, look, there's storm clouds." I believe that was a very shallow cold shot. But like at the very end of this scene, Ben holds Sterling's hand. Because Sterling is
poor kid. Holy fuck.
less than happy about the way that these things have gone. Everything's loud, and Ripley is throwing things at the wall because that's a pretty natural response.
Yeah, throwing things at the wall, then throwing up and sobbing
from the sheer distress. And only after like.
Oh.
And I think our point is relatively straightforward and is definitely what like the chapter is getting at, which is just that they did this wrong.
Yeah. Horribly
traumatically wrong. But then we get to the very end. Something's been right is being done. We have her best friends coming in. And that's when it's Blair and it's Devon. And their parents are there. And they're providing the emotional support that Ripley needs, and Ripley gets to wear her clothes so she feels more comfortable and she's like herself. And the thing that I want to get at in this scene is that Ripley calls all her friends weird. They're a little funky. They're pre coming out or like deciding their identity or really differentiating into adulthood. So there's a lot of people that they could be. In the same way that Natalie had this big vision of who Camellia could have become or what could have happened to her. They're sort of the trunk of a tree. The branches are still to come. We are at the trunk of the tree in the timeline where they could like further on they could diverge into many different people.
Although I do just want to jump back very quickly there to something you said just now, which is Natalie having an idea, like having this idea of what Camellia could be, which I do actually disagree with. I think she has that idea of what could be being done to Camellia, but I think she has a very, very solid and rigid idea of who Camellia is.
Well, yeah, she's had that picture hanging up that makes her cry. It's specifically that AI generated, as expected, aged up version of Camellia, which is not who Ripley is.
Exactly. Anyway, please go on about
I'm going to focus on Devon for to be specific in this. Devon could just be a boy that's been inoculated against a certain genre of sexism. Like you're not getting any boys will be boys like pulling of hair from him. He's grown up in a way that he has a very good understanding of these boundaries. And maybe that's because it'll be part of his personal identity when he grows up. Like maybe this is a kid that will be an ace adult, or will transition, or will be gay, or any of these things. The fact that he is a contemporary with Ripley, who has talked about gender a little bit, gives that sort of queer lens to it. But even if he weren't any of those things, the reality of now is that he can be any of and that it is what we know in this moment as he's casting those possibilities into the future is that he is a safe kid, and that he has no real danger, and Ripley is confident, and Devon's dad is confident, and there's certainty here that what Devon is perfectly safe. But from Natalie's perspective, Ripley has been in danger for the entirety of her life. And through that lens, she can only perceive Devon as yet another possible danger. And projects onto an 11-year-old ideas of like, like this is the kind of concern that you might have for teenagers at home, when the bedroom door is locked. Maybe as a parent that's a very reasonable thing. An 11-year-old does not pose any sort of that.
It's some real heterosexual nonsense is what I've written down here in my notes. To see two 11-year-olds like sitting on a bed together and crying and say, "Oh, that's inappropriate." It's like they're kids. They're fucking sobbing their eyes out, like dealing with some traumatic shit, and you're going to assume something inappropriate is happening there. Like, fucking hell. I think this is where Natalie comes into as like a horrifying version of a mother that many people can relate as something that has happened in their life.
And within that, Ripley is sort of speed running a queer trauma here, where usually it wouldn't happen this way, but the format of being informed that you have your name wrong and that you're dressing incorrectly and that you believe the things that you believe and feel about yourself are false, and that you must now adapt to someone else's higher authority opinion of what your reality is. Ripley's doing a speed run of that. And at the same time, because she has that same broad spectrum of possibilities, it becomes a universal quality. It could apply to anyone. It could apply to all of these stories, which I think is part of why there's so much backlash against Natalie in this, in the wider community.
Because you can relate that any expression of alternativism, whether that is gender-based or sexuality-based or like fucking even fashion-based or subculture-based, like she is pushing against that here. And so it is very easy to map Natalie onto a figure in your life that has done that and say, okay, well, I hate that, and therefore I hate Natalie, which,
and to draw that to a final conclusion, and bring it back to fucking Ben, it's only after he gets this golden shot, this like harrowing image of Natalie going, "See, aren't I correct?" While the fully legible room goes a firm and visible no. Like a harrowed Ripley turning visibly against Natalie in this moment. Only then does he turn his camera off. And none of this should have been on camera.
None of it should have been camera. It should, never, ever in a million years should you film that.
I honestly, like, the place that this has brought my brain to is a horror film called Wreck. It's Portuguese, if my memory is serving. And it's this sort of found footage of an interview with some firemen that respond to an emergency, and they ride along, and then it turns out to be a zombie incident. And the whole film is happening from the perspective of the camera as it's filming. And it is an excellent work of horror. So when I was reading this section, I loaded in that image and it perfectly belonged in that horror movie because what the camera is seeing is awful, and Ben's contribution to the scenario is making it visible.
Yeah.
So this is probably where I'd like to get into a bold and specific prediction. I don't think that this documentary of Ben's is ever going to be published. I think that
would be moral.
The purpose of it in setting is more that we get to be the audience to the documentary as it unfolds. The hypothetical audience as we read Tip. And it comes together as though we're actually seeing the show. And I can imagine the end of the arc being that the camera gets destroyed and the footage gets ruined, or the building gets burned down, or some variety thereof to render Ben unable to complete it.
Interesting. I like that theory.
While the camera is in the scene, it conforms things to the genre, conforms people to the expectations, and causes people to behave as though they are on camera. So we have things like Josie's mom like piping up to say, "I'm not that bad a parent," and we have Natalie like breaking into a pine, and everything's being delivered in a more dramatic and more intense manner. So it's almost like the audience in the room with them, like the comment section of like what would be replying to this film is happening in the moment, and the sort of urgency that people are feeling when they're being interviewed is being actualized in that second because there is commentation. And so this final high melodrama moment where it becomes abundantly clear to everyone in the room that Natalie and Ripley are not going to get along because this is a major breach in terms of what she can cope with after like a not so much a straw breaking a camel's back, but like a significant trespass of what Ripley would tolerate from her mother, and the fact that only once the camera goes off, the chapter finishes, and in my mind the only reason that things went that way is because the camera is there. Because if Natalie knows that she's being filmed, then she wants to identify herself as a mother, and like in terms of what Wildbow have been talking about of a person that identifies themselves as someone who has a child of a certain stripe, like and isn't coping or grieving with that, but is like internalized it as their personality. That like in Natalie's case, that her daughter was kidnapped. She takes the sort of phantasm, the internal logic of who she's supposed to be, and barges into this scenario, playing the character of Natalie the mother, and it's disastrous, and it hurts, and it is all on camera to see. And I think that is why Natalie even bothered to do it in the first place, because she didn't like how it looked.
So that's interesting. I actually disagree about that. Yeah. So,
I mean, hey,
yeah.
That is why there's two of us.
That is why there's two of us. Yeah. So I'm really seeing that end of moment thing, end of chapter moment being, and it's discussed like right before, it's like around boundaries. So Devon's dad says he's overly protective of the girls in his friend group, and he has an excellent sense of boundaries. And Natalie kind of, I don't know, it feels self-righteously says it doesn't look like he has a sense of boundaries, which is really interesting to me because he does. Like, straight up, Devon has an excellent sense of boundaries because he is exactly where Ripley wants him to be, Like, he's on the bed next to her, like, grieving her life with her and providing comfort and providing support. And exactly what she needs at the moment is what he is doing. And he's not overstepping any boundaries. And we clearly see from her reaction that he's not making her uncomfortable or anything.
Yeah.
What he doesn't have a sense of is Devon doesn't know Natalie's boundaries around the objects that belong to her, which in this case is Camellia belongs to Natalie. And so Devon doesn't understand that boundary because he's not normally navigating that boundary. He's navigating the boundary of the people around him. And yeah, so to me, it feels like camera on or camera off, Natalie would have stalked up to that door and she would have said, Devon, that's not appropriate. Like, get off the bed with my daughter. Because Camellia is, capital H, her daughter. She is an object that belongs to her, and she is going to exercise her authority around that object and her agency around that. Yeah, and her claim around that object to make sure that all others are interacting with that object in a way that fits within her boundaries, and not actually letting Ripley like self-actualize and decide for herself what she is comfortable with.
I think there's still centered in that a preoccupation with how things look rather than how things are.
That's fair. I
agree
to disagree, I think, there.
whether it's particularly that Natalie acts because she is concerned about scrutiny and appearing as a mother, or because she has internalized that, and it's not that Ben's camera is there, but it's how she thinks, and she doesn't like this sort of intrusion on the claims and boundaries and ownership that she perceives. The result we can agree on.
Is that she's further traumatizing Ripley, and specifically stepping in to stop any healing from that trauma, which is horrible. There's also, there's the moment earlier on where, Natalie, it's noted that like Natalie went out for a while and she comes back with like a bunch of clothes, and they're all clothes that are specifically within her aesthetic for Camellia. It's the dresses, it's like the flowers on the sweater and stuff. Like, it's very Camellia teal, and it's very not Ripley. And it's Camellia as an object, Camellia as a part of Natalie, not Ripley as a human being.
It's sort of like a dress-up doll kind of attitude of, I gave you this name so you could have this brand, and I'd like you to appeal to the brand, please.
Yeah.
Well, no, not really a please.
No, there's no please there.
But yeah, it's tragic.
Yeah, it's a tragic chapter. This chapter is a tragedy.
Natalie does not mean to be an evil person. She wants to raise her child. She is so she has been so utterly thrown through not just a loop but a whole hell spiral that she cannot do it.
Look, I think to me a lot of the time Natalie is really hitting those like conservative parent vibes at the moment, where it is, my child is, capital M, my child is mine, and therefore I decide what happens to them. I decide what they do. I decide who their friends are. I decide how they act with those friends. I decide what they wear. I decide what they eat. Like, they are mine. This is an object that belongs to me. And it's heartbreaking. And
I wonder if they made that true error of Natalie and her husband. I wonder if they made that true error of maybe a child will fix our marriage.
Oh God. I fucking hope not. But I wouldn't be too surprised, I guess.
It is a very conservative hoop to jump through of perceiving a child more as a object that might, make the house a bit nicer rather than
I could definitely see it with Sterling. Like, this is your consolation child.
Yeah.
To make, because you desperately want to actively be a mother. And so here is your child to be a mother to.
You know what? I'm throwing all the nuance out the window. I'm trashing all the nuance. I'm getting rid of it. No more enlightening discussion. No more considering alternative points of view.
Hell yeah, fuck
Mia
that shit.
is entirely forgiven. Natalie entirely forgiven. Natalie's husband.
That's the true villain of the story.
He is the source of all evil in Claw America. He did this.
I can see it.
It's crazy how he taught Davy Cavalcanti how to be a butcher of human beings and did his medical classes. It's crazy how Natalie's husband specifically taught the child murderers, Tyr's parents, how to do their gig. Timoteo apprenticed under him. He's the guy that was burning the national parks down. It's all Natalie's husband. The only reason that Sterling is suffering is because Natalie's husband thought that was a solution to Camellia being stolen. Only reason that Mia stole Camellia is because Natalie was trying so hard to raise her and it wasn't working because of that asshole. It's just him. He is the locus of all evil, and if we just didn't have him, the world would be entirely solved. It'd be like plucking a thread out of a tight elastic band. It would all just flip into place, and everything would be resolved.
Mm-hmm. I'm happy with this. Works for me.
Then again, he did play video games with Sterling one time, so I bet he's actually entirely forgivable.
Yeah, but it might have been like Call of Duty, and he was probably yelling slurs in the in the chat. So and that's what I understand of gaming, right? That's what gamers do. Please confirm, gamers in the chat.
I have never played an FPS.
Good for you. I've played entirely too many.
Egads! The call is coming from inside the house.
It is.
With that, shall we get into some bold and specific predictions?
Yeah, let's get into bold and specific predictions. Oh, I didn't say specific very well. Okay, go.
I think that from Mia's perspective, Ripley is being held by the Cavalcantis via the turned police guards that are nearby. Her backdoor access to the hospital systems has given her a full picture of the allegiances at play, and it's basically a silent standoff of people who want to kidnap Ripley. I think that the latter chapters of Tip are just going to be this sort of like sports field throwing of the ball of like Mia and Carson rush in, but it's Davy Cavalcanti with a steel chair, and Highland go long. It's just going to be completely wild as people scramble for custody.
Perfect.
And,
I love it.
That's when my prediction for Ryder is going to happen, where he's going to have a heroic stand and immediately get gunned down, because that's how bullets work.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. That's a good bold and specific prediction. So my bold and specific prediction this week is that Ripley is going to kidnap Sterling and move across the country, taking up Mia's trade to keep herself and her new baby brother away from the team up of Ben and Mia trying to track them down.
Ben and
Which
Mia?
I think is fun. Yeah, Ben and Mia teaming up to track down Ripley and Sterling.
That's crazy.
It's very bold and it's very specific.
Hey,
and I love it.
One thing that I really appreciated about getting a lot of comments on last week's episode was that I believe I've maintained this. I love being wrong. It's being incorrect about things, one of my favorite hobbies, because it means that I can, when I am highly specific in speculation, I can be every once in a while, once in a blue moon, completely accurate about something. So
yeah, that's what I feel about mine.
It really feels like a 1% chance every time, and it's the only, like, if I was going to gamble on anything, I believe bold and specific predictions would be the place. And it's nice, when you're wrong about something, you get to grow, you get to hear you get to synthesize a new perspective and be more nuanced and wise about things from here on out. I just think this is absolutely in the spirit of that, to dare to believe that Ben, camera in your face, and Mia, surveillance state, are going to ever work together.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's going to happen. 100% chance.
As to our discussion question, last week we asked,
if you could have a documentary made on any topic from a fictional thing or setting, what would it be? Right, I'm starting with this one. So Mr. Perfector says, as a big Otherverse fan, I'd love to see a David Attenborough-esque nature documentary that covers realms wildlife, like the natural flora and fauna of the Warrens or the Fae Courts. And yeah, that sounds fucking sick.
Wildbow has done some bestiaries on such creatures, and
I need to read that.
I need to see them scuttle. I want to see their hives. I want to see them socialize. Wolf Tamer 9 said that they might think of a better answer, but their canned answer is what would give an as to the question of like what would you give an on-the-spot TED talk about. It's the parenting dynamics and nature versus nurture in Malcolm in the Middle. I'm of the opinion that kids don't just naturally turn out like that. Which is interesting. As alternatively, they say they'd love a deep dive into the world building of Homestuck, from the punch card alchemy to the god systems, to the way that the video game works. It's all glossed over for other plot stuff, and the timelines operate by very different rules every time they're engaged with. To which I would say, don't do that to yourself. Don't do it.
As a proud non-Homestuck reader, I agree.
Listen, I have had a username for like that is a variation on adjective noun or like one word big word for the whole time I've been on the internet. And getting introduced to Homestuck as my very first anything of internet culture.
Oof.
You know,
Crucial.
Some scars are indistinguishable from our faces. As far as being abducted and at age 11 and learning that you were already kidnapped and this is your real mom that's stolen you, I think Ripley and I have roughly similar levels of trauma. Because I read Homestuck when I was 11, and I've never been the same.
Oh my god. That feels like way too early to read Homestuck. I don't. That can't do good things to your psyche.
I believe a lot about the person that I am is explained by
by Homestuck.
Well, not by being a Homestuck fan. I am not a Homestuck fan. I was marinated in Homestuck when I was too young, and have had to
grind in it, as Bolden would say,
grow as a person since. And yeah, it's that is a dark place. Do not go into those horror terrors. Do not delve into that dreaming dark. You will find things that will change you, and you will not come back right.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so 40i2 says they would very much enjoy documentaries filling us in on things that did not make it to the work. So focusing on other Wildbow works from Worm, like the criminal history of the Undersiders, from Small Time Gang to Crime Syndicate. Yeah, which would be fun. I haven't read Ward. Oh, sorry, they haven't read Ward yet, so this documentary can cover Ward period and beyond too. From Pact, complete biography of I've forgotten how to say his name. Pedrick. Which, yes, God, please. From Pale, political analysis of the biggest lordships like Paris or London, outlining global relations and major powers. And again, God, please. And from Twig, history of the Crown and the Crown States, which, yeah, that'd be interesting.
Each of those could be 4 hours long, and I would choose not to sleep to watch them.
Yeah, exactly.
Coffee Dog, 14, asked for a Star Wars nature documentary.
Yeah.
To which I would say, the puppets still exist. You can go into I'm imagining taking a walk through a puppet gallery where all of the Star Wars creatures are just being gently piloted by people on staff, and you just kind of get to walk by them, and it's like a little fantasy alien zoo. For myself, I would love to see a really any resource, doesn't have to be documentary, on the shifting prominence of nature and fortune in Pale, capital N, capital F, because those two forces like taking over, like first you have natural disasters that get rid of your home, but eventually you get financial disasters that get rid of your home. That sort of magic shifting of prominence is really very interesting to me, and is such a in terms of how Pale's world building allows for that sort of metaphysical interaction to articulate something that is very present, like for example climate change. I would love to see like stories about those impacts and those like the little turf wars between like nature being in charge of forces like disaster, forces like wealth, only for fortune to barge in and take over those forces. Yeah. Yeah, and that would be that'd be really interesting. I think I would enjoy that. Personally, I would really, really love a documentary just all about the kidnapping of Camellia Teal. I think that would be super fascinating. Anyway, you motherfucker. This week's discussion question is: if someone brought you a hospital care package, what would nourish yourself the most? This is obviously in comparison to what was brought to Ripley, which was a bunch of clothes that she fucking hated. Or eventually 2 best friends. Or 2 best friends, which really did help. What would like bring you the most peace and recovery? That's our show. Check out Wildbow's Patreon at patreon.com/Wildbow. This is his documentary. We're just giving consent to be filmed. And please give us a rating and a review on the podcatcher of your choice. If you want to chat to us about the show or follow along with live reads, check out our channel on the Doof Media Discord. Find the invite link at doofmedia.com/Discord.
All right, and we will see you later.
Bye for now.